What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball, recapping Week 8's Sunday slate, and joining me to do that, as he always is, it is my good friend Chris Allen. Chris, what's going on, buddy?
So I went as Agent K or whatever for Men in Black this morning on FF Live. I wish I actually had a neuralizer, because after watching my Bengals lose today, I'm going to need to forget that. I'm going to need that little gadget so I can just forget everything that happened today. But now I'm just past that. We're through most of Week 8, have plenty of action to get to. So let's try and recap everything, and hopefully I can just get through that portion of it and just remember all the better parts of what happened during most of today.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Chris, because as we always organize these Sunday shows, we go through the first segment, the boom and bust players of the week, of course, but it's the games that we care about most. The games that we sort of care about is the second segment. The games that could have been an email is the third segment. I hate to break it to you, Chris. We're going to be talking about that Jets-Bengals game pretty early, because I would argue it's one of the few it's one of the few games that we actually have to care. I mean, we have to care about all the games in some degree, obviously, but it's the game we got to care about most, because it was probably the most competitive performance. So steel yourself here pretty quickly, pal. Put on your professional face, because we're going to have to get to that one pretty early.
Yeah, I'm going to be the meme of the guy with the smiley face on but crying underneath the mask. Like, that is going to be me talking through that game.
All right, perfect. Well, like I said, first we have to get into our boom and bust players of the week. Let's start with our boom player of the week from the early slate. It has to be James Cook, who absolutely went off against the Carolina Panthers run defense that I would add was improving going into this game. The Panthers run defense had been looking pretty good the last few weeks. Well, not looking so great, as they allow multiple touchdowns, over 200 yards from scrimmage to James Cook with a couple of long runs. The Bills passing game was a little bit fits and starts in this one, Chris. Did not matter one bit, because James Cook was going off.
Yeah, and actually I looked at that game and looked at it as a potential poor matchup for James Cook, because to your point, over the past couple of weeks, even going back even further, Carolina Panthers defense had not allowed a rusher to get over 50 total yards on the ground over the last month of play. And that was after facing Ramondre Stevenson, Devon Achane, Javonte Williams, who just put up a monster score today, and then also Breece Hall, or at least a decent game for Javonte, and also Breece Hall, limiting most of the opposing rushers to under 50 yards. It's really just been the guys that have been involved in the passing game that have been able to put up viable fantasy production against Carolina. So seeing James Cook, take a 64-yarder to the house and also put on a show from an explosive rush rate standpoint, pretty solid to see, especially after, I would say, a up and down game for Josh Allen in Week 8.
No question. Look, we could have given this award to Jonathan Taylor, who did lead the way with 36.4 fantasy points, but a little peek behind the curtain. We picked this one pretty early. Okay, we picked this one early, so it went to James Cook, who totally deserved it. Of course, totally deserved it. 30 fantasy point games for Jonathan Taylor, just like, oh yeah, of course, another one of those. But James Cook bouncing back off a nice couple of down weeks in Week 5, Week 6 prior to the bye with single-digit fantasy points. He bounces back with a monster 33.6 performance in this one. All right, our bust player of the week, and this is just so perfectly fantasy football here, Chris. Bijan Robinson in a fantastic matchup against the Miami Dolphins defense, unfortunately has to be our bust player of the week. And this tweet from our buddy JJ Zacharyson at Late Round QB just perfectly sums up what happened with Bijan Robinson today. The Dolphins entered Week 8 having allowed 896 running back rushing yards on the season, the most in the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons entered this week averaging 128.8 running back rushing yards per game offensively. That is the most in the NFL. The Falcons had 43 running back rush yards against the Dolphins on Sunday as a whole unit. So just sometimes, Chris, we get one of these weeks where all the matchups that look like, oh yeah, it's going to be that smash spot, it just doesn't happen for whatever random reason. That's what happened here with Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, and I guess hindsight being 2020, could we have at least set up the potential for a letdown for Bijan, especially with them having to switch from Michael Penix to Kirk Cousins, knowing that Cousins has really no juice left in his arm. But also, I would say the larger cog that was missing from Atlanta's offense is Drake London being out in this game. So when you're asking an old and hobbled Kirk Cousins to drop back to pass with Darnell Mooney, Kadero Hodge, and Kyle Pitts, of course, who Kyle Pitts played well enough. You're really putting a lot on the onus of the Falcons' rushing attack, where both Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier saw a stacked box or 8 men in the box on over 50% of their carries. Actually, Tyler Algier was up past 70%. So Miami really had the right approach defensively against the Falcons, where it was, we know you've got a poor passer behind that line. We're going to ask you to really beat us through the air and try and put as much as we can to stop that rushing attack led by Bijan Robinson. So again, hindsight being 2020, maybe we could have seen some of this coming, but this type of performance I did not see coming at all.
Yeah, 25 yards on the ground for Bijan Robinson. I could see how this could go wrong because of the Kirk Cousins factor, to your point, which obviously we didn't get the official Kirk Cousins news until I believe it was like Saturday morning that he was going to start, which, of course, I'm an idiot, and I picked him up in a couple super flex spots to start where I was missing Lamar Jackson and picked him up to start. So I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. Like him and Drake London are going to make it happen against the Dolphins. Well, Drake London missed this game. We didn't find that out until Sunday morning. So a lot went wrong here. But even with the Kirk Cousins him starting this game, I think you made a great point about Drake London, which I'm going to come back to that point when we get to this game. Spoiler alert, much, much later in the show, in the email section of the program. That's a great point about this, but also the fact that Kirk Cousins, this he has no mobility. You mentioned no juice in his arm. He also has 0.0 mobility at this point. We saw that last year, that was a little bit of an anchor to the ground game where they couldn't get that going because he made them very siloed. And that's been a critique of this offense all year long, that they've been very siloed in terms of run pass. They don't get under center very much, but Michael Penix is not – he's not a scrambler. He doesn't like to move around, but he at least will do it every now and again and give them something there. That's always going to be a bit of a problem when you have that complete pocket statue as a running threat. So, like I said, I would never have predicted this performance from Bijan Robinson, but it's always good to unpack these things. And even if it is in hindsight, like how did we arrive here, and maybe some warning signs that we can see going forward. But for the most part, Chris, this is just, hey, that's football. You can hate it, but this is why we love this game, because it's so completely unpredictable like this.
Right, because if you're going to tell me that you're going to have Bijan Robinson facing one of the worst rush defenses in the league, 9 times, probably 10 times out of 10, I'm going to take that back and say 10 times out of 10, fantasy managers are going to say, I don't care who's under center. I don't care what wide receivers are missing from that game. I'm starting Bijan Robinson against this defense. We would probably make that choice 100 times out of 100. So it's just the results that wind up getting us to this point that we're at, late on a Sunday evening.
All right, I tried to yak through some of that Bijan Robinson stuff to delay the inevitable here, because it is time to get into the games that we care about most, and that means that we must start with what ended up being the wildest game of Week 8 Sunday slate. Jets 39, Bengals 38. We're not going to talk about the Bengals here to start, because as always, we start with the winners of these games. First of all, Chris, I think we have to give 2 shout outs here. Number one, just shout out to the Jets as a whole. Aaron Glenn gets his first win, but also the entire franchise for getting the first win of the season on a day where it was announced that franchise legend center Nick Mangold passed away at 41. Rest in peace. Thoughts to his family. That was just obviously, it was good to, I saw Dan Hansis, who's a Jets fan, tweeting about this. You can think about tanking and draft picks and all that. Sometimes you just want to see your team win a football game, especially when you get news like that on a Sunday morning. But also, special shout out to Justin Fields as well for putting this game out there. And look, Justin Fields is not the most important player that, on the field today. We'll talk about the guy who absolutely dominated this game, but Fields getting this win after he was likely to be benched this week if Tyrod Taylor had been healthy, and his team owner went out and made the statements that he did, which as we're showing the graphic here. It's hard when you have a quarterback with the rating that we've got. If you look at any head coach with a quarterback like that, you're going to see similar results across the league. I've never seen a team owner in the middle of the season throw a player under the bus quite that hard. So shout out to Justin Fields for going out and getting this win.
Yeah, and I guess a bit of trivia for me personally. So Nick Mangold, he comes from Centerville, Ohio, and I grew up in Beaver Creek, Ohio, which is like a small town in Dayton. I actually played against Nick Mangold back in high school. So I'm a year older than Mangold was when he passed. He went to Alter High School, and there's a big rivalry between my high school, Carroll, and his. So played against him. He was much larger human than I am. I mean, I'm all over like 5'9", a buck. I was like maybe a buck 05 back in high school. Yeah. So, I mean, but shouts out to him. And also, I mean, a tough loss. I mean, and also very sad to see that he's now gone. And of course, for the Jets offense as a whole, and seeing them kind of rally behind like this, and also Justin Fields throughout the week after, I mean, yeah, those comments, and really just the way Justin Fields, he carried himself after a lot of those comments. I mean, just trying to essentially push it all to the side, putting a lot of his trust in his faith in God and all of that, to say that this is how he's going to try and operate as the leader for this team. And really, he came out and showed that with his trust in Aaron Glenn, also the trust in Tanner Engstrand, and calling such a solid game against this porous Bengals defense. So hats off to him for the way they were able to perform today.
Yeah, no question about it. And you mentioned Tanner Engstrand. I do think I continue to say this passing game is well designed. Like, there are spots here. So if the quarterback can just find it, you know, I think that there are spots available in this passing game. When they've had these good moments, it's just been against some pretty bad defenses, including Cincinnati. That's one thing when we talk about this game and the next game, when we get to the Houston Texans game, where I think we need to be careful about extrapolating some of this because of the opponents that they were facing. Obviously, though, the Jets still got it done against this defense. Breece Hall was the guy that he was the straw that stirred the drink in this one here. Monster game from Breece Hall with 133 yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 for 14 as a receiver, and the game-winning touchdown pass to Mason Taylor. So, I mean, shout out to Breece Hall for like doing prime LaDainian Tomlinson stuff, multiple rushing touchdowns, and throwing a damn touchdown pass.
Yeah, just 4 attempts for Breece Hall where he was contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage with just 72% of the team's rushing attempts. He really was putting the team on his back in terms of being able to put them in those advantageous situations and allowing them to pull ahead, at least keep in line with the Bengals, and of course, ultimately pull ahead. So it's between him and Isaiah Davis. I mean, this rushing attack, I know they're not going to be able to face a rush defense like Cincinnati's week in and week out, but the fact that they have juice from not just one, but 2 of their running backs, let's push aside the trade rumors for Breece Hall. If this is going to be their 1-2 punch with Justin Fields also potentially operating better as a passer, and of course we know his ability as a runner as well. I mean, this could be like, you could see the theory, you can understand the idea behind the Jets signing them and what they can do with this offense. So maybe if they add a little bit more receiver talent around him, you could really start to see how this could come together at some point down the line. But I don't know if it's going to be this season or maybe in 2026, but still, the parts and pieces are there with the core that they have right now on offense.
43% of the snaps for Isaiah Davis, who you mentioned there, 12 touches to 21 for Hall, and he also cleared 100 yards from scrimmage with 109. So again, to me, like when we're talking about projecting this forward, and you mentioned some of the component parts are here, I do hear you. Look, like this whole thing will look better when Garrett Wilson's out there, obviously. Like, this is incredible to get this win when no receiver really pops off here, which of course, like, none of these guys are big time target earners, but they go on a bye in week 9, then they come back and they get the Browns and the Patriots right after that. And those are 2 run defenses that are on the complete other end of the spectrum in terms of what Cincinnati's bringing to the table here. So I don't know if I want to call this like a sell high moment for Breece Hall, both for the Jets and for fantasy managers, but I do kind of struggle to see this repeating itself once they get off that week 9 bye.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think the opportunity will be there, and hopefully with how successful they were. I mean, 67% rushing success rate for Breece Hall, and also how often Fields was able to pick up yards on the ground with his legs. There might be some parts and pieces from the concepts and plays that Engstrom was calling that they can try and use this as a blueprint for how they can get this offense to really start to churn once they have Garrett Wilson back in the lineup.
Yeah, I like what your points about just the parts and pieces of the offensive design and stuff like that. And to Aaron Glenn's credit, he was much more aggressive and in tune with the game in terms of 4th down decision makings. He made the right call in terms of going for 2 at one point in this game. So that was a nice step forward for Aaron Glenn and what's been a very, very rocky first season from him. Flipping to the other side of the ball here, I'm just going to toss this to you. What did you see from the Bengals in a game where they scored 38 points? Like, the offense, I think for the most, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like to me like the offense mostly did its job here.
Yeah, but that's the way that 2024 shook out for the Cincinnati Bengals. It was the offense really trying to get enough points so that the defense couldn't screw things up for them in the end. And nothing's really changed here in 2025, regardless of who's under center, if it's Joe Burrow or Joe Flacco. The one thing that I would say stood out for this game was Chase Brown essentially being back for in our fantasy good graces. I mean, 57% of the rushing attempts went to Chase Brown. I mean, looks solid as a runner, couple of explosive plays. And of course, him operating as a receiver out of the backfield, he got that receiving touchdown as well. So between him and Samaje Perine that we know can mix in on third downs, and Perine actually got an explosive, I think around a 30-yard rushing touchdown as well in this game. It's seeing Brown being able to operate behind their offensive line, and with Joe Flacco flicking the ball out to Jamar Chase on just a ridiculous number of attempts, it does give Brown the room to move and actually create some of the space he needs in order to get going as a runner. So that's that's the only thing that really stood out, at least to me, from the Bengals offense, because the rest of it is just throw it to Jamar. Let's take a deep shot to T. Higgins every now and again, even though just 2 targets for T, which is something of a bummer. But still, it's just we'll lean on the wide receivers, and then afterwards we can then start to attack from a rushing standpoint, because they're not as defenses aren't really keying in on that part of the offense with the receivers performing so well.
No, it's a great point about Chase Brown. Another excellent game here. Samaje Perine definitely mixing in more often. And I guess you could maybe take that as bad news for Chase Brown, but at the same time, maybe it's taking some of the grinder work away from him to just let him be more efficient here. Samaje Perine averaged 2.6 touches in the first 5 games. He's gone 10, 7, 8 the last 3 games, but those have coincided with good games from Chase Brown. So I don't know whether to overreact to that, but man, you mentioned like just getting the ball to Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase has 54 targets in 3 games with Joe Flacco this year. 54 targets. That is obnoxious stuff in a game where he has 19 in this one. No one else has more than 3 here, which is Noah Fant and Chase Brown are the guys getting 3. That is where this team is right now in terms of Joe Flacco. He just knows where his bread is buttered. He's getting to that. He's getting Jamar Chase that football over and over and over again, which is great. That's good to see. And it's also making Flacco, it was a good matchup. We could have seen this one coming, but he's also a guy that you can credibly stream. Like, I streamed him in one spot. He also had a 13-yard run on a 3rd and 12 where he slipped out of a tackle in addition to a sneak at the goal line. So Flacco has entered the streaming quarterback kind of conversation because he just knows Jamar Chase is really good at football, which we all do.
Oh, 100%. And next week, the Bengals play the Bears. They host them at home. So with how well the Ravens performed their passing game with Snoop Huntley under center, you could assume there's going to be a similar path for Joe Flacco to be a viable quarterback streaming option here in week 9. And I would also assume that Ben Johnson, if he has any say about how he's going to attack this Bengals defense, if Tanner Engstrom, who also, I mean, I think there's a connection between Engstrom and Ben Johnson, if memory serves, something along those lines. So if there's any type of way for the Chicago Bears offense to really get back on track, it should be against Cincinnati in week 9.
All right, let's get to the next game that we really care about. And like I said, we're going to have to do some stretching with some of these games because there was not a lot of competitive football here in week 8. Texans 26, 49ers 15. While this game was a little bit, back and forth in terms of not really back and forth. Honestly, it was mostly Houston kind of leading on this one. There was still a lot that we learned from this game. Texans, my biggest takeaway here is I thought CJ Stroud, Chris, was completely locked in. All right, he was dialed in for this game. He completed 14 of 15 passes for a season high, 196 yards and 2 touchdowns targeting in-breaking routes. And also, I loved the Nick Caley. I've given him a lot of crap. The whole industry has given him a lot of crap. But I thought there was some good adjustments, mostly those in-breaking routes, targeting a middle of the field for the 49ers defense that is very banged up. And Houston used 6+ offensive linemen more than any other team this season in this game, which I thought really helped the protection in the run game. So I don't know where you are with CJ Stroud, Chris. I think he is not all that much to blame for what has happened this season. He's not been blameless, but he's not one of the first problems with this offense to me. And I think he still showed today what he can do when the situation is right.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say Stroud is even in the top 5 of problems for the Texans offense as a whole, like throughout most of 2025. And even in 2024, where we started to see some of the high-end play start to fade from Stroud, I don't think it was anything that we could attribute to him. It was more about just everything else kind of crumbling behind around him, whether it was the offensive line, whether it was the loss of Tank Dell and really just relying on Nico Collins, who is more of your boundary or your prototypical X receiver, and not having much around him. I think that really started to shine towards the back end of 2024. And speaking of that, I mean, you mentioned earlier how locked in Stroud was in this game. 0 sacks today for CJ Stroud. The last time that CJ Stroud was not taken to the ground by the opposing defense, you have to go all the way back to week 5 of 2023 in order to see that type of performance from him.
Wow.
I mean, that's how long it's been since the offensive line and also the offense has been working in tandem enough for him to stay upright throughout this game. And it's also his first passing game over 300 yards since last year. I mean, since week 5 of 2024. So this is what I'm talking about, where it's like I cannot attribute any of the systemic issues with the Texans offense with CJ Stroud. It really just has been about the infrastructure that the Texans have put around him.
Yeah, and like I said, he's not blameless. I think there have been times where bad habits have crept into his game, but you almost can't blame him because of the carnage that he has had to play through so far, especially these last like 12 months or so have just been really, really poor for this team. But this was a game here where there was even times, Chris, where there were free rushers. He was under pressure, and I think he responded well to it. He scrambled a couple of times in this game. He ended the day with 7 carries for 30 yards, 13-yard long run. There were times where he was just decisive, which I always think Stroud just should run a little bit more, because I think he's got that in his bag. Not like he's going to be a, Justin Fields or Lamar Jackson or something like that, but he's got an ability to run a little bit and just keep the offense moving. I liked that response. I also thought there were several times where he would make a move under pressure and there would actually be an answer in the short area, whether it was dump the ball off to Dalton Schultz, dump the ball off to Woody Marks as a receiver. I thought that was really good to see from Nick Caley. Again, I want to give Nick Caley some props here because I've given him so much heat. And I'm going to give him a slight bit more of heat here in just a second. But for the most part, I think we saw some nice changes from this Houston offense that I'd love to see moving forward. CJ Stroud completed 7 of 9 passes under pressure for 111 yards with a touchdown while taking no sacks today, as we're showing on the screen. So that was really, really an encouraging performance from Stroud. Love to see that. Like I said, though, this is a very, very banged up 49ers defense. So I do want to kind of caution people extrapolating too much, but I do also think that we saw some systemic changes here from Houston that could propel them forward. Let's talk about some of these other young players that got involved here. Let's start with the passing game. The route participation numbers go as followed for Houston pass catchers. Jaden Higgins leads the way with 81% route participation. Dalton Schultz was 79%. Xavier Hutchinson 79%. Jalen Knoll 45%. Woody Marks 41%. Braxton Berrios 38%. Berrios got banged up a little bit later in the game, but man, it was still driving me crazy. Like, not enough Jalen Knoll, and this guy just makes plays every single time you throw him the football. It was driving me crazy. We just did not get enough Jalen Knoll in this game, but at least it was a little bit of a step forward in terms of from a production standpoint.
Yeah, and kind of to your point, I wonder if for the Houston Texans offense, if it's more of the, what's the phrase, necessity is the mother of invention, where is if you remove Nico Collins, a guy that demands targets given his skill and efficiency once you get the ball in his hands, but where he plays makes it a bit more volatile. But now if you remove that from the offense for this game because of his concussion, now you have all these other guys that can really win on some of those in-breaking routes, kind of to your point. And also if Stroud needs some of those short area dump off targets, you have a guy like Jaden Higgins or Jalen Noel, or you have a guy like Dalton Schultz, or even Woody Marks, who mixed in for about 10 to 11% of the team's targets and had about a 50-yard explosive on a swing pass from Stroud. That's where, again, Nick Caley not having that guy where it's just, all right, Stroud's in trouble, give it to Nico Collins. Or even Stroud himself when he's like, well, I'm under pressure. Collins is down there somewhere, and I'm going to lob it down the field. Yeah. That's where having to change some of the way that he was going to approach dealing with pressure and dealing with defenders in his face and having those other guys that can work the short and intermediate parts of the field. That's that systemic change that I think that you're pointing to that could be at least beneficial to both him and Caley as they move forward in the season.
Yeah, because Nico's drawing all of those true brackets and double covers and stuff like that, which makes sense because he lines up only at X. They don't move him around a lot, and none of these other guys are established NFL players. If we can start to just kind of, again, mix and match some of these players, because Jaden Higgins for the most part ran out as an X receiver in this game, although his one touchdown reception, he led the team in targets with 8. He only caught 4 of those for 34 yards and 1 touchdown, but the touchdown came on a play where he was lined up in the slot, where they motioned him from one side of the field to the other. That was nice to see. That's how you lean into the best of Jaden Higgins' skill set. So again, don't want to extrapolate too much from Houston's side of this from a passing game standpoint because of the matchup, but nevertheless encouraging to see. Also encouraging to see, while Woody Marks was behind Nick Chubb in terms of snaps, or in terms of touches, 53% of the touches for Nick Chubb, 42% for Woody Marks. Marks was much more productive. He ran 17 routes to 9 for Chubb. Again, I think we're figuring out a little bit of these personnel questions that have been haunting Houston so far this year.
Yeah, and Marks was the more efficient of the two runners, a 54% rushing success rate compared to around 40% for Nick Chubb. So you can see just the level of explosivity that Marks has. I mean, it's the younger, fresh legs type of deal with Woody Marks coming into it. Whereas Nick Chubb, if you need 3 yards, yeah, maybe Nick Chubb will get you to 3 yards. You need 4 yards, maybe. Depends on how the offensive line is looking on that particular play and how many men are in the box. It's that type of thing where Chubb is at in his career. So there's no knock against him. It's just, will you have the right offensive game environment, like in this case, facing the 49ers with their Fred Warner-less and Bosa-less type defense that will allow a guy like Marks to really take advantage of it? In this case, yes. But moving forward in the weeks to come for the Texans offense, it might not be the case. So yeah, I'm with you that Marks is kind of that, probably sitting in that RB3 type range, that unless we really start to see a separation between the two RBs or the offensive environment really is conducive to that type of production, I really think Marks is kind of a flex play at best for right now.
On the 49ers side of things, sometimes a game goes exactly to your worst fears. And for me, my concern with Mac Jones in this game was just the pressure he was going to face. Highlighted this on the Fantasy Film Room episode with Nate Tice earlier this week, that Mac Jones is one of these quarterbacks who, when he's not under pressure, the results are really good. When he's under pressure, he becomes one of the least effective quarterbacks in the league. According to NFL Pro here, despite only taking 1 sack against the Texans, Mac Jones was pressured on 50% of his dropbacks in this game. And when he was under pressure, Jones completed just 4 of 13 passes for 64 yards with an interception. When he wasn't under pressure, much more effective, 15 of 19 for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that's ultimately, to me, Chris, the story of this game, that the 49ers passing offense was never able to find a rhythm, because we know they're banged up in the receiver room, and then you have just this offensive line going against a Texans defensive line that can just make a quarterback's life hell, and a quarterback who's very sensitive to that pressure.
Yeah, and it also didn't help that, I mean, a few brutal drops like from the 49ers pass catching core. Jennings had a drop on first down. I think that was in the first half. Kendrick Bourne also got a drop. And then Jordan Watkins, who's rotated in now with some of the injuries there, had also a terrible drop on third down, which could have extended their drive. So I think that's where you just have a lot of those things that nothing's really going your way. If Mac Jones is not playing well because of the amount of pressure, you also have these drops. And also, I mean, Christian McCaffrey, no touches in the first quarter, which was also kind of bizarre, not really seeing him getting involved as we expected. So it just seemed like just a cavalcade of issues for the 49ers offense in this one. So throwaway game for them. This is the types of games that could potentially happen for them, and they should be able to get right after in the next game.
At least George Kittle got into the end zone on National Tight Ends Day, and his understudy, Jake Tonjes, also found his way into the end zone, so there was that. So the Niners sound like they are considering opening Brandon Ayuk's 21-day practice window this week. Ricky Pearsall, we know, is still due to come back at some point. I know this is like a weekly theme with the Niners, but hopefully we see them healthier at some point. Brock Purdy, he's kind of on my radar, the whole toe injury that he's dealing with right now. Will he, won't he play? I don't know. So hopefully we see the Niners a little bit more fully stocked when they go against some of these good defenses going forward. But let's flip to the next game, the final game that we really care about here. And I mean, this game was a complete blowout, and yet we do have to care about it a little bit. Broncos 44, Cowboys 24. One of those Cowboys scores was thanks to Joe Milton, who had 1 touchdown pass to Dak Prescott's 0, if you'd like to know how this game went for the Dallas Cowboys. So let's start with the Denver Broncos here for a second. My question to you, Chris, on the stat sheet, and I think seeing some of it live, I'm like, wow, this is the Broncos offense I'd like to see. Guys beyond Cortland Sutton are stepping up. Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, both those guys scored. RJ Harvey was really explosive in this game. J.K. Dobbins went over 100 yards. How much of this, though, is a breakthrough for a Broncos offense that's been a little stuck in the mud? Or is this just, hey, that Cowboys defense is real bad?
I would say it's almost like when we were talking earlier about the Jets facing the Bengals, where you could see how the concepts and how the wide receivers and running backs were being deployed on the field to the point where, all right, if Sean Payton wants to pull some of those things out and say, all right, this worked really well, targeting Troy Franklin down the field, even though we already knew he was more of that downfield threat. Okay, that works. Pat Bryant, he's been saying he wants to get him more involved. Okay, so let's see what worked here in this game for him. But they're not always going to be playing the Cowboys secondary week in and week out. So I think it's more of somewhere in the middle that some of those play calls and those tendencies that work for the wide receivers, and of course, RJ Harvey as well, those are the things that I'm really taking away to say, yes, they can be effective, but really you have to have that type of defense that you're going up against to really try and emphasize that, yeah, this could really work in theory, but again, they're not always going to be playing the Cowboys defense each week.
RJ Harvey, it's tough because you don't actually see much of it's not as if he overtook J.K. Dobbins or anything like that. He plays 21% of the snaps here, which is actually fewer than the 2 previous games. The thing is, he just made the most of his 8 touches. He was explosive. He kind of showed you the reason, the 2 touchdowns on the ground, the 1 on the air. He just showed you, hey, like, this is why you want to hold this guy. 46 yards total, 40 of them came on 1 run in terms of his rushing work. This is why you want to hold him, just in case J.K. Dobbins misses any time, or if Sean Payton just decides, hey, I trust the rookie a little bit more, and maybe this game could be part of that. I trust the rookie a little bit more. I'm going to start playing him. But the thing is, J.K. Dobbins did nothing in this game with 15 carries for 111 yards to lose any playing time. So just RJ Harvey remains a really good bench stash. If you had to play him for some reason because of buys, shout out to you. That's amazing. Would love to see that lineup. So you can send that to me on social media if you want to. In the passing game, Troy Franklin has been that number 2 receiver. He just hasn't come through in some good spots. He came through here. Pat Bryant, 4 targets, 2 catches, 40 yards. He also didn't really get any like playing time bump. He just remains kind of their 3rd receiver. So again, I'm not sure that we can extrapolate these things because they're mostly like from a playing time perspective, everybody's pretty similar, but it was just good to see that these young playmakers can actually step up and give Bo Nix and Sean Payton a little boost to an offense that, like I said, has been a little stagnant this year.
Exactly. And we've had the conversation throughout most of this season of who is going to be that wide receiver 2 or pass catcher 2 that's going to step up alongside Cortland Sutton. And Troy Franklin had seemed like that guy because he had been around 75, 80% of the routes coming into this game. So from a usage standpoint, he should be there. But we've seen Evan Ingram mix in for a few targets here and there. Marvin Mims mix in for a few targets here and there. None of that level of consistency that would allow us to say with some confidence that, yep, if this is going to be a game where the passing game is going to perform well, but I'm not sure about Sutton's matchup, I'm going to just lean on Troy Franklin. We've never had that confidence up until this point. So again, hopefully they're not going to face the Cowboys secondary each week, but with Franklin really coming through in this game, I would hope that this leads to a bit more playing time and a bit more consistency regarding how often Bo Nix looks his way. But back to Cortland Sutton for a second, man, he should have had a bigger game. I know, like, our buddy Ian Hartitz tweeting about how, like, just the missed opportunities, the sheesh moments for Cortland Sutton. If you got him on your roster, I feel for you. I got him on a couple of teams myself because it should have been a bigger game for Cortland for sure.
Should have been a bigger game. He still escapes with like 67 yards here, so it could have been a lot worse for Cortland Sutton. But yeah, no doubt it could have been. He had a touchdown called back because of OPI, I believe, and then he, like, very next play drops one in the end zone. So things are going to happen. That is a brutal back-to-back break. But things like that happen. Wide receiver goes up and down, up and down, up and down. The guy's still generally, I think his consistency and sort of his steadiness is a little bit overstated as a fantasy football starter, but for the most part, he's a guy that you can play every single week. And again, if in his bad games, he comes away with 60 something yards, I'm not crying too many tears over that. I think it's something you can live with, but hopefully you just didn't watch the game and see those 2 plays back to back, because that would have really irritated you. All right, Cowboys here before we get out of this one. I guess the good news is Javonte Williams gets his 2 revenge game touchdowns, and CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, they give you like floor performances with 19 combined targets, but it was not the best day for the Dallas Cowboys offense.
No, and that was actually on a game where I wasn't watching it live. I caught it towards the second half, but I instantly saw that Patrick Surtain went down early in the game and was kind of hobbled throughout the rest of it and wound up exiting early. So my thought was, all right, well, Broncos defense without their top coverage defender, Dak Prescott, and how often he likes to drop back to pass. This should be a game where they can take this and actually be able to make this more of a game. But of course, Prescott, he'll have these games where, as often he likes to fit the ball into tight windows, he's going to have these types of performances. So I understand it. The one thing that didn't make a ton of sense to me, and I don't know how often you saw how much Jake Ferguson was out there on the field, but nothing from Jake Ferguson, especially on today of all days being National Tight End Day. If there was going to be any day where we would at least continue to see Ferguson, if not from a volume standpoint, but definitely from a touchdown equity standpoint, find his way into the end zone. I thought today was going to be that day, but just an absolute bagel from the guy that we had essentially crowned the tight end one on the season, especially after CeeDee Lamb went down. So I don't know if I'm taking much from this game, at least for Ferguson or from Dak, but it's just one of those kind of a head scratcher type of moments, just given how well both of those players had played from a fantasy standpoint and real football standpoint up until today.
Yeah, a lot of pressure on Dak in this one. I haven't seen the numbers, but I think he just, a little off kilter, a little out of rhythm, made a few ill-timed throws. Tyler Guyton was definitely a guy that was giving up some of that pressure as their starting left tackle. Jake Ferguson is just, I think Boone made the point this week that he's probably the guy that everybody's talking about, oh no, George Pickens, what's going to happen when CeeDee Lamb gets back? But I think Jake Ferguson is that kind of middle of the field threat. He's a little bit more susceptible to games like this, but when you're the tight end who's not the one or two target in the passing game, you're going to have some of these moments. Unfortunately, it's just a full zero catch. That's pretty brutal. But I still think he's generally a tight end one rest of season. Wouldn't freak out too much about it. All right. That does it for the games that we care most about. Now let's get into the games that we sort of care about, starting with Eagles 38, Giants 20. On the Eagles side of it, let's talk Saquon Barkley, the good and the bad. The good, he stuck a big old middle finger up to the panic meter with a monster game, 150 yards on the ground. Oh, Saquon Barkley, where's the explosive runs? They're in week 8. That's where the explosive runs were. He ripped off a 60-plus yarder very, very early on in this contest. He finishes, like I said, with a monster game. The bad news, he suffered a groin injury in the second half. Mike Garafolo from the NFL Network had this, that Barkley said he's not concerned about his groin injury, said he's dealt with it before. As for whether he pushed to get back in the game, he said, quote, I went out swinging, I'll say that. So we'll see what this means for Barkley going forward, but it was awesome to see him against a good defensive line really get rolling and show a vintage Saquon Barkley performance.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Zach Berman from The Athletic saying, entering today, Saquon Barkley's longest rush this season was 17 yards. And against the Giants, Barkley had rushes of 65, 28, and 2 of 18 yards. I mean, it really is just vintage Saquon in week 8. But it's not just the fact that he was performing well, but then, like you mentioned, the groin injury to Saquon, we saw Tank Bigsby come in playing ahead of Will Shipley, and Tank Bigsby was performing well too. I mean, of his 7 carries in the fourth quarter for Bigsby, 4 of them went for 10 or more yards. He also wound up getting fairly close to the century mark. But I would say that for folks that look at the box score and see how well Bigsby did and say that they want to pick him up, just remember, Eagles are on the week 9 bye. As we're assuming, especially from some of the post-game reports from Barkley himself saying that he's not too worried about it. So I wouldn't prioritize him right now as a guy that you want to stash on your roster, even for the fact that Barkley and his role on that offense is something that if something were to happen, Bigsby walks into that. But if you do have other holes that you need to fill, Bigsby is at least a priority pickup for me in week 9.
Yeah, and I think just the Eagles' run game systemically, some good wrinkles here. A couple of them to give a shout out to Kevin Patullo, who is another guy who's taken a lot of heat so far this year, showing some adjustments. According to NFL Pro, 8 of Barkley's 14 carries came with the quarterback under center, which gained 116 yards and a touchdown. We have not seen a lot of that from the Eagles in the Jalen Hurts era. That's been a nice adjustment. And as well, the Eagles utilized jumbo personnel, that's 6+ offensive linemen, on 18% of their plays against the Giants, the second highest rate in the game under Nick Sirianni, behind their week 7 win over the Vikings. So look, they've had issues in the ground game. They're starting to make some moves to solve those, which was really good to see. And again, for any Saquon Barkley fantasy managers, you want to see some of these schematic changes here to start to get back to that performance that we saw from last year. In the passing game, I don't know if you have too many thoughts on this. I just got to say, shout out to Super Bowl champion Jahan Dotson. Mossed a guy. I mean, I'm probably some dude who should be on the practice squad because the Giants are so damn banged up. Don't care. It happened. Jahan Dotson, he had that big touchdown catch. Dallas Goedert scored a couple touchdowns. Devontae Smith had 84 yards as well.
Yeah, really, I don't think we had too much of a conundrum regarding who we were going to start in this game with A.J. Brown being out. It was going to be a good game, or at least we thought most of the opportunity was going to go towards Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert. I mean, Devonta Smith, 45% of the team's targets. I mean, right out of the gate, it was like almost the first play of the game. Jalen Hurts tries to take a deep shot to Devonta Smith down the left sideline. Didn't connect, but we knew that, all right, if that's going to be their plan, they want to try and test some of their corners deep. They were going to wind up hitting on some of those later. And of course, Dotson going up against Giants corner, I think it was Corey Black, if memory serves. You're getting put up in a rock in a hard place with the amount of talent, at least that the Eagles have in their passing game. If they can rely on Dotson as their essentially wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 now in this game with Brown out, if that's the type of talent that they have and they can still beat you downfield, what are you going to do, man?
What are you going to do? That is the story of the Eagles offense. Just ride those waves and look for the highs. They're going to be there at some point. Unfortunately, the lows are on the Giants side here in this game, starting running back Cam Skattebo left the game with a dislocated ankle and was taken to a local hospital for further evaluation. He's going to undergo surgery tonight in the Philadelphia area, which is just brutal to see. And the scene afterwards, Chris, was wild in a way that it only could be for a Cam Skattebo injury here. Number one, Skattebo basically asked to be, he puts his hand up to be helped up off the field, like when his ankle is literally hanging off at like 90 degrees, which was just, it was rough. It was brutal. Jackson Dart, they cut to him and you see multiple visible F-bombs in response to his buddy Cam Skattebo going down. The entire bench comes out for Cam Skattebo, and even though this is an away game, it's in Philadelphia, the guy has made himself such an iconic figure in the NFL. The entire stadium is cheering for him as he's getting carted off with the air cast. So again, it was a wild scene. Everything with the Cam Skattebo experience has been wild so far this season, but unfortunately it looks like his season is coming to an end.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part, because with everything else going poorly for the Giants from an injury standpoint, Malik Neighbors already gone. Now you lose Cam Skattebo. In this game, Daniel Bellinger also hurt his shoulder and he went down. Just the cutaways to Brian Daboll on the side of the field. The man just looked apoplectic at times, especially with the missed OPI on Darius Slayton down the left sideline. And also that odd sequence from the Eagles with the tush push, which, man, I don't really want to get into the whole debate, but I'm wondering if that's going to be something that's going to be a larger conversation in the offseason. But just everything just working against the Giants. And now they lose not the most important player, because that's where Jackson Dart is, but probably their second most important player on their offense as of right now. So that's just a tough look. And also moving forward, they face the 49ers, and we look how poorly their defense just played, and then Chicago over the next couple of weeks. And I would have circled those as matchups for Dart and Skattebo, the guys that I would want to have in my starting lineup. But now with yet another injury that they've sustained, I don't know if this is going to be either matchup that they would be able to take advantage of. So that's my concern for the Giants.
Totally agree. And I thought Jackson Dart acquitted himself well in this game. Just don't know how much of that we can see week to week with the lack of juice in this offense right now. So maybe they make a move for a pass catcher at the deadline, but I don't know, man. I just hope Dart can continue to stack some good moments going forward, because he has been really fun to watch. And I thought, again, he acquitted himself well, had some moments in this game going forward. Hopefully we see some more of those. Let's get to the next game here. Ravens 30, Bears 16. Starting with the Ravens side of things here, Chris. Can you explain to me, like I'm 5 years old, why this team ever signed Cooper Rush to be the backup? I know Snoop Huntley he was on the Browns roster this offseason, I believe. He was one of their quarterback circus over there. He was a part of that, but nevertheless, like Cooper Rush, I never understood why he was the backup. And then you see Snoop Huntley in this game go out and once again be the only Ravens quarterback that has started a game in 2020 to actually win, other than Lamar Jackson. He accounts now for 4 victories during that span. He was great on play action, 7 of 8 for 95 yards and a touchdown, 155.7 passer rating. He was also, once again, nice as a rusher, 8 for 53 with 3 for 42 on scrambles. So it's just, he can go out there and run the offense. And Cooper Rush, it just never made sense, like stylistically, why he was the backup quarterback for this team. And I feel like they just burned a couple of games this year when Lamar went down by having him as the backup. So maybe, am I being too critical, or can, again, you explain to me like I'm 5 years old what the point of that was?
No, not at all. Because sure, I can understand from the aspect of Cooper Rush when he came in for Dak Prescott last season, how well he played. But those are 2 totally different offenses from a schematic standpoint. So if the Ravens wanted to try and hang their hat on, well, we've got a guy that can operate the offense as intended, and if we do wind up having to miss a game or be without Lamar Jackson, we can have this guy come in because we've seen him perform well in the past. But that's not the same, because Lamar Jackson doesn't play the same way. And even when Lamar Jackson missed games a couple of seasons ago and Snoop came in behind him, we still saw almost a similar level of continuity between the Ravens offense, with Huntley operating out of either under center or out of shotgun. So I didn't get the move as well. So seeing them essentially get more or less bailed out by being able to get Snoop Huntley back onto their roster, and also seeing how well he was able to perform in this game. I mean, 8 different pass catchers with at least a target in this game. I mean, I saw, and I didn't see it register because I was trying to go through some of the box scores. I saw a tweet saying Devin Duvernay was getting targets in 2025, and I was like, this is where we're at? I mean, this is what the offense can do at this point. So that's where I can see why they would want to have a guy like Tyler Huntley doing this, because this is where Todd Monken can really start to get into his bag of tricks and still keep the Ravens offense moving despite not having Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I was also surprised to see Devin Duvernay getting targets from the Bears at this point. But Luther Burden left this game with a concussion, so that might have been part of it. They need somebody to play in that rotational wide receiver 4 range. But the running game was much better in this one. Derrick Henry, a couple touchdowns. Keaton Mitchell got involved on some explosive runs, which that happens when you have the rushing threat at quarterback. So it's good to see. Lamar will probably be back in week 9 after a really weird practice report. Minor scandal, over the last 2 days.
An honest mistake from John Harbaugh.
An honest mistake. What can you do? There's no difference between a full and a limited practice here anymore. So I think the league's going to take a look at that. I think we're probably not going to have to take a look at too many more Snoop Huntley starts, but good to see him acquit himself well on this one. I want to make this note as a way to transition to the Bears, because I've already seen this all big struggle, bad game, and it was not a good game for the Bears passing offense as a whole, against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. I will just note that the Ravens got some guys back healthy coming out of the bye week, and this is usually their things aren't working well on defense the last couple of years. Let's just do something different with Kyle Hamilton, which is what they did in this game. Kyle Hamilton, according to NFL Pro, aligned in the box on 61% of his snaps, his highest rate in a game since the 2022 season. And Hamilton rushed the passer 10 times, recorded 2 pressures, both season highs, also registered 2 run stops with this, which was one of the first of the seasons for him. I think the Ravens came out and pitched a little bit of a different plan than what we've seen and got some guys back healthy. So does that make you feel any better about what I do think was another disappointing performance from the Bears passing game?
Not really. Yes, I get that they tried to at least throw a curveball at them, but still, it's just another, I would say, up and down performance from Caleb Williams. And we've seen that over the past few games. And the hope was that they go into the bye, try and figure some stuff out, and see what makes the most sense in terms of play calling tendencies for Ben Johnson to Caleb Williams, and just didn't really see that come to fruition. I mean, because right now, over the last few games, I mean, when Caleb Williams is operating, let's say, within structures, let's say around less than 2.5 seconds to pass, he's averaging just about like 3.8 air yards per attempt. But it's all those out of structure plays, like once things start to break down, where he's throwing the ball a bit farther downfield. And that's where we've seen some of those explosives to Roma Dunze or DJ Moore in this game, who had a sick catch down the right sideline towards the back end of the game. But it's just, those are the types of things where it's just, there's something not clicking for how Ben Johnson wants to call the game and how Caleb Williams wants to play the game. And so until we really start to see that mesh, which we thought we were getting in weeks like 3 and 4 in the early parts of the season, especially when Odunze had that breakout game about 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, that's just my general concern about this offense moving forward. But at least fantasy managers that have Rome Odunze, no problems here in this game. I mean, 10 targets. I mean, first time this season so far with Rome Odunze having a double-digit targets in a single game. So at least from a opportunity standpoint, he's getting the right wide receivers. But let's just hope that, again, the consistency starts to match up with the rest of the production we see on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see Rome Odunze get back on track. A little bit predictable, especially against a very man coverage heavy defense. He had 7 for 114 on those team high 10 targets. One of those targets actually was one he probably could have caught along the sideline that he let slip. There was another one where Caleb Williams throws late over the middle of the field, which is, I think, one of his biggest problems right now. He almost trusts his arm too much, so he's just late throwing it over the middle, and the play is open to Rome, but he probably would have gotten smashed because of how late he threw it. But it doesn't matter because Nate Wiggins is able to jump in front of it, pick it off. So just not great there. And I'm the biggest Odunze bro, but I think they got to get somebody else going in this passing game too. Like, not to take away from Odunze, but somebody else has to step up here. This is his 4th game of the season, Rome Odunze, with more than 40% of the team air yards. And nobody else really is involved here. DJ Moore finishes the game with 73 yards, but 42 of those came on that out of structure. It was an incredible throw from Caleb Williams and a pretty sweet catch from DJ Moore with, I believe, one hand. But it's like no one else clears 40 yards. DJ at that point, he has 42 yards on that catch, 73 yards in the game. Somebody else has to step up. Is it going to be Luther Burden? Well, he goes into concussion protocol. Colson Loveland plays on 78% of the dropbacks in terms of running a route, but he doesn't really register a big impact. So it probably does come back to the quarterback, but we just got to get something else going here for this Bears offense.
Yeah, and that's my concern about what this is going to be for them moving forward. Because if you don't have a solid wide receiver too, and that's not to say that the talent doesn't exist already on the field. DJ Moore, we've seen DJ Moore operate as a solid wide receiver 1 in years past when he was with Carolina and then in the early parts of his tenure with Chicago. It's just, how did they all get in sync together? How does Caleb Williams try and thread the needle of, all right, well, now I'm going to hit Rome Odunze in the intermediate to deep parts of the field, but now I'm going to layer a throw to DJ Moore on the next one. I'm going to get Colston Loveland on a route to the flats on the next one, have DeAndre Swift run for 6 yards afterwards. It's that sequencing of plays that we just haven't seen enough of out of the Chicago Bears to say that this is an offense that we know Ben Johnson has his fingers in and Caleb Williams is buying into that. It's really just been kind of a tug of war between the two, between Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson, in order to get the production we've seen out there on the field. So until I see a little bit more synchronicity between play caller and the guy that's executing the plays, I really just need to see more of that. And I have just some general concerns about that pass game from the Bears.
All right, final game that we sort of care about, and like I said, this is even a stretch here, but Patriots 32, Browns 13. I want to talk about this game because, man, Drake May, what an impressive performance from Drake May. Myles Garrett has a career-high 5 sacks, ties his season high with 8 pressures in this loss. It doubles his sack total entering the week with the 5, which was a career best for him. But the fact that Drake May has a stat line that looks like what it did today, where he completes over 70% of his passes, where he just gets it all done. Here's a couple of notes from Drake May. 12.4 adjusted yards per attempt and 58.8% passing success rate. Both of those ranked second among week 8 quarterbacks in the early slate. And I had somebody ask me, well, hey, you got to include adjusted net yards per attempt because he lost all those sack yards. Oh, well, his adjusted net yards per attempt was over 8.0, which ranked 3rd among the quarterbacks that at the time had completed their game. So any way you want to slice it, Drake May, the fact that, he takes 6 sacks in total. Myles Garrett dominates the game. And Drake May is still incredible. I mean, you just can't – there's not enough platitudes here for what this guy's doing this year, Chris.
No, there aren't. And this is from our buddy Ben Solak over at ESPN. Browns DC Jim Schwartz has coached 49 regular and postseason games in Cleveland. Drake May's 54.5% dropback success rate against the Browns is the second best QB game against this defense in Schwartz's tenure. I mean, this is the same DC that's had Joe Burrow's number in multiple games so far over the past couple of seasons. And now we see Drake May just go in there with Stephon Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, Demario Douglas. I mean, with guys with a pass catching core that we would say is inferior to what the Browns typically see on a season in, season out basis, and completely light them up. So no, I'm with you. There just aren't enough positives to say about what I would say a failed head coach, but awesome offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels is doing now with his team, and also how well Drake May is executing this offense with the firepower that he currently has at his disposal.
Right, and getting all those guys activated is really impressive as well. Mac Hollins leads the team with 7 for 89, catching all 7 of his targets. Kayshon Boutte scores another deep touchdown despite catching just 3 passes. Hunter Henry gets in the end zone. Stephon Diggs gets his first touchdown of the season, which you could tell he was juiced up about. They kind of designed a little quick hitter for him, and he was jumping all over Drake May afterwards. So the vibes are high in New England's passing attack. Let's talk about the run game here real quick. TreVeyon Henderson, the good and the bad in this game. The good, he finally made the most of his limited touches with 10 carries for 75 yards. The bad, he still played just 22% of the snaps, and he fumbled in this game. So I don't know that that changes too much for TreVeyon Henderson.
No, I mean, of course, it was like in the fourth quarter, inside the 10-yard line, and he loses a fumble. And like after everything was really going right for him, after a week 7 performance where we're talking about Terrell Jennings, the 5-minute back for Mike Vrabel, and how Henderson gets banished to the shadow realm for whatever reason, and now see him operate really well behind that offensive line, 3 explosive plays as well, and then it's a fumble. Because this is the type of performance where you see this in week 8, and now you look ahead to week 9, and who are they playing? The Falcons that just got diced up by James Cook. But now I don't have the same confidence for wanting to start TreVeyon Henderson because we don't know if Mike Vrabel is going to apply any sort of punishment for that lost fumble. So now it's just that's going to be the tough part for me. It's good to see the opportunity there, but for that end to that performance, it makes me at least somewhat, I would say, uncertain about wanting to start him in week 9.
On the Browns side of things here, Quinshon Judkins unfortunately suffered a shoulder injury here after not getting off to a good start in this game anyways against one of the best run defenses in the NFL, which, by the way, Bijan Robinson faces this Patriots run defense next week, so we'll see about that. The good, though, Harold Fannin, badass player, despite David Njoku actually playing in this game and also scoring a touchdown, he ran a route on 71% of the dropbacks, was targeted almost 30% of those, and had a couple of sick plays in this one, including his touchdown. So Harold Fannin, no matter what, is locked in here, Chris. I've just been really impressed with him. I don't know what you think. Otherwise, though, I think this Browns team might have the worst wide receiver room in the entire NFL. So thank God that they actually do have Harold Fannin.
I talked about it earlier today about if you have a Cleveland Browns wide receiver on your roster, just don't do it, man. Just find another player to put on your team instead. Jerry Jeudy, 2 targets, 0 catches. Nothing for Jerry Jeudy. So no, I want nothing to do with it. And we've also seen that shift towards them using more of their tight ends and running backs to create a receiving production for the Browns. And that was even before today. I mean, Dylan Gabriel was targeting tight ends and running backs on the majority of his pass attempts. Really hadn't seen much out of the receiving game for either of the wide receivers. And honestly, a wide receiver hadn't gotten into the end zone for the Browns since Cedric Tillman did it back in week 3 or so when Joe Flacco was still starting for them. So no, I'm over it. Let's hope maybe greener pastures for Jerry Jeudy on another roster somewhere else, but it's not with Cleveland for sure.
No, it's not. And let me just read off some of these Browns route participation here, because you mentioned Jerry Jeudy, who, by the way, has run the second most routes among wide receivers this year and is outside the top 50 in yardage. He continues to be like the biggest underperformer in terms of his play, but also the environment around him. I'm kind of at enough already territory with Dylan Gabriel, which I don't know what that means. He's thrown 20 plus air yards on fewer than 3% of his passes this year, which just can't function that way at all. But Shedeur Sanders was inactive in this game. I think he's dealing with a back injury, I believe. So I don't need to see a Bailey Zappi start, but I do think I've seen enough of Dylan Gabriel at this point. But these are the other wide receiver route participation numbers, and obviously they're rotating 2 tight ends, so none of these guys are going to be full-time players. But the number 2 receiver in terms of route participation for the Cleveland Browns is Gage Larvadane, 58%. Chris, I don't even know who that is. I think he is I think he's an undrafted free agent this year. I have nothing. Don't got a damn route tree on our buddy Gage Larvadane there. Jamari Thrash, 53%, and Isaiah Bond, who has been terrible this year, which is not surprising. They gave him a fully guaranteed contract after taking no snaps in training camp because he was trying to get himself, acquitted for a sexual assault allegation prior to the draft. And then Malachi Corley, 5%, who's a failed draft pick with the Jets. It's just there's just nothing in this wide receiver room. So that might not be a fair shake for Dylan Gabriel if he's trying to push the ball down the field, but man, this Browns offense is a rough watch right now. So level of concern for Quinshon Judkins coming out of this game, Chris.
I would say a mild level of concern. So I'd say out of a 10, it's more like a 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. It's just because of the injury to his shoulder. I think the early indications were it's an AC sprain, something along those lines. And that's really why you saw Dylan Sampson get back into the receiving game, 6 targets. And I'm assuming most of that is likely due to Judkins having to leave the game early because of the shoulder injury. So let's check the practice reports or see if there are any other injury notes coming out of this, say on Tuesday or Wednesday. But for right now, that's my only level of concern, because we've seen the offense be something of a drag for the rest of the from a yards per drive, EPA per drive, that standpoint. And Judkins is still, the opportunity has buoyed a lot of his production. So I would assume that to still be the case, even if Dylan Gabriel is something of a project, let's say, to be kind to the rookie. Because what did we expect from Dylan Gabriel, honestly? What did we expect from him, honestly?
Yeah, no, he was overdrafted because he's like capable of being a backup quarterback in the NFL, but he's on a bad roster with a bad offensive line and really not a lot of wide receiver talent. Like, yeah, what are we expecting here? And I'm not expecting like Shedeur Sanders to look great if he does need to play, but I would like to see him at some point just to see what we got here. But this team's drafting a quarterback next year, and we all knew that. All right.
Yeah.
That does it for the games we sort of care about. Now let's get into the games that could have been an email, and we could have made the whole show an email with some of these blowouts, but these were the most emaily of the email games here. Colts 38, Titans 14. Chris, the Colts put in the B team, Riley Leonard, A.D. Mitchell, Anthony Gould, with over 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter because they scored 30-plus points for the 5th time this season. The Colts offensive machine continues to roll on.
Yeah, and Jonathan Taylor getting 3 touchdowns yet again, and I thought he got the 3rd rushing touchdown, but it was one of those, scam pop passes from Daniel Jones that was kind of killing me, because that would have put him in, like, in terms of history for having the 3 straight rushing touchdowns. But either way, I mean, good call by you earlier today talking about Josh Downs and advocating for him and seeing how, again, diverse this passing game is. Michael Pittman with just a grown man touchdown catch with just one arm pinning it against his shoulder earlier. Alec Pierce getting his deep shot, Tyler Warren getting shots in the flats and working downfield, and of course Josh Downs mixing in as well and finding the end zone. It's just they have so many options that it's hard to trust who you're going to start each week. But if you have an offense like this, it's going to be putting up 30 plus points on a week in, week out basis. Starting any one of them kind of makes some sense. So I won't have as much concern with the way that the Colts are playing if anybody asks me a question about which wide receiver to start.
I couldn't believe this was the first game that Daniel Jones has thrown 3 touchdowns because he's played so well this year. But this is the first game all year that he's thrown 3 touchdowns. And like you said, everybody got activated here. Of course, JT did his thing. But yeah, Alec Pierce catches his weekly deep shot. Michael Pittman just operating like this consistent, steady force. And I love the way they're using Josh Downs around the goal line. He's not going to get the volume that I hoped for like early on in the summer because Michael Pittman and Tyler Warren are doing their things. But they're using him in really intentional, cool ways in this offense. So that's been nice to see. On the Titans side of things, I mean, the Titans are the Titans. I don't know what else to say. Chimere Dike is actually putting up some moments for them. So if you're like desperate in deeper leagues, he at least looks like the guy that you want in this passing game. But the sequence that really embodied this game, between like the difference between these two teams, Mike McCoy, who's the interim head coach for the Tennessee Titans, punted for a net of 22 yards instead of going for a 4th and 3 from the plus 42 down 2 scores versus this Colts offense. And then on the very next play, the 226-pound freak show running back, Jonathan Taylor, rips off an 80-yard touchdown run where he topped 21 miles per hour. And you can see shots of Cam Ward on the sideline like, what are we doing not going for this here? So that's just where the Titans are right now, Chris.
Yeah, and it's a tough look. And I know Cam Ward still has a lot to learn at being an NFL quarterback because you've seen seen the flashes and spurts and starts for him, and that's almost on a play-by-play basis. In some cases, he can get the ball out quickly, like we saw in a couple of those shots to DK and also to A.O. Maynor. But other times, you can see him hesitate, hitch a couple of times behind the line of scrimmage, then wind up taking a sack, or just trying to scramble around and try and create something when there's really nothing there, just given the pass-catching talent that he has around hem. So it's kind of a lost season at this point, especially considering they've already fired their head coach. So maybe we'll look towards 2026. But like we both can agree, I mean, DK looking like a solid pickup for them, and also A.O. Maynor. But let's wait for more of that production once we get into the 2026 season.
Next game, Buccaneers 23, Saints 3. The Bucs really didn't have to do very much and they did not do very much on offense. Did not have to do very much on offense to win this game because their defense pretty much took over the show here. Antoine Winfield played like a monster in this game. Just several standout performances on defense, including Anthony Nelson as well. I mean, just so much cool stuff from the Bucs defense. So didn't get much from a fantasy standpoint from their offense, but the big news coming out of this is the Saints pulled the plug on Spencer Rattler, who I think had played solid this year, Chris, but with some of the turnovers had just given this team no choice. So they put Tyler Shuck in there. What did you see from Shuck in this game, if at all?
I mean, showed a little bit of a live arm like here and there, but against the Todd Bowles-led defense, we couldn't really expect much anyway. And that was kind of the case I was laying out this morning for either Spencer Rattler or whomever was going to have to start if they wind up pulling the plug on Rattler, just for how fast they can create pressure against the opposing defenses. And we saw that from the Bucs just last week when they played, when they were playing. So that's where I don't have like too many concerns, because even in this game where they wind up switching quarterbacks, Rashid Shaheed still pops off for 90 plus yards, and Chris Olave still at least gives you a floor enough performance from the amount of opportunity that both him and Rashid are earning in that offense. So just don't look at the game. Just don't maybe watch the game. I know Saints diehard fans are probably going to hate the remark, but maybe if you're a fantasy manager that has either one of those players on your roster, just don't watch it and come back and say, oh, well, I've got 12, 13 PPR points. That's not so bad.
Yeah, and if you have these receivers in fantasy, definitely don't watch today's game, because there was a missed double move touchdown for Rashid Shaheed, but he also had a bad fumble. There were some mistakes at the catch point for all of these guys. So I thought Tyler Shuck played all right in terms of under the heat of pressure and things like that, but we'll see. We'll see if he's going to actually start the game next week. I would imagine so, but we'll see what happens there. All right. Next game, Buffalo Bills 40, Panthers 9. The Bills passing game looked a little disjointed for a lot of this, but it's like we said at the top, didn't really matter because James Cook went off. Khalil Shakir had 88 yards and a touchdown while not getting a single target of over 10 air yards in this game. And the big reason here, Chris, is just Andy Dalton was abysmal in this game. I mean, just if there was any narrative, and there was, I'm sure you've seen it. There's narratives that like, oh yeah, Andy Dalton's gonna be better for this Panthers offense. He was unplayable in this game. Just took sacks that you absolutely can't take. Was completely inaccurate. So, fantasy bros, remember that one game he had last year against the Raiders where he was awesome with Deontay Johnson. Remember Deontay Johnson?
Yeah.
But he's pretty much not had like any.
No, and I would say for Dalton specifically, looking at his efficiency, I mean, negative 0.46 EPA per dropback for Dalton. That is the 18th worst, worst performance of any quarterback to make a start this season. I mean, for reference, that's worse than all of Cam Ward's starts, since we were just talking about the Titans a bit ago. That's worse than all of Bryce Young's starts. So for anybody that thought that Dalton was going to be something of an upgrade over the Panthers' current starter, no. But still, at least he was able to feed our guy, Tedorow McMillan. We saw him like 43% of the team's targets. He still performed well. But outside of that, it really is just a battle for the wide receiver 2 spot. But if we have any questions about the efficiency of who's going to be under center, I don't know if we really should be rostering either of Xavier Legette or Jalen Coker, who I know Coker had some appeal over the offseason, but with the way this passing game is operated, I don't think I want either at this point.
I'm still optimistic that this passing game can look a little bit better with Bryce Young under center because he can actually do something under pressure. He's been really good under pressure this year. The in structure stuff needs to be better. But this was a bad game from Carolina. Couldn't get the run game going because they got blown out. Even though Rico Dowdle, 8 carries for 54 yards, was the more efficient guy once again. All right, final game here. Dolphins 34, Falcons 10. I mean, the Dolphins completely shut down the Falcons run game, as we mentioned, and they had no counterpunch without Drake London. I mean, Drake London is so clearly and obviously what makes this passing game go that it's embarrassing that he ever has games with fewer than 8 targets, which he does all the time, by the way. So this just once again confirmed to me. I was tweeting with Scott Barrett about this over the weekend because he asked me kind of like, what's up with these splits between Drake London man versus zone stuff and the Darnell Mooney thing. Yeah. I was like, look at Michael Penix's best games. They all so cleanly overlap with when Drake London gets a bunch of targets that it's so confusing why he doesn't get going here, because you see what happens to this passing game without him in this one.
Yeah, I mean, Falcons, they were 0 for 6 on third downs with Kirk Cousins trying to throw the ball. Like we mentioned earlier, to whether it was Darnell Mooney, whether it was Kyle Pitts, whether it was Kadero Hodge. I mean, you really just can't have that type of success or expect that type of success if that's the talent that you're having to work with, and especially if you are a hobbled quarterback at this stage of your career that Kirk Cousins is. But like we talked earlier today on FFL, that if you were going to start Mooney, it was going to be on the potential for how much opportunity he was going to get. And seeing him get over 30% of the team's air yards, okay, yes, I mean, that's the type of opportunity that you would want. But still, if it's coming from Kirk Cousins, where you could see the lack of, I'd say, rapport that the two had. I mean, a number of overthrows like from Kirk Cousins. I mean, of course, Mooney had a drop in a couple of times. So it's just, that's the type of environment that we had for Darnell Mooney, where we thought it was going to be almost a pitch and catch type of thing from Cousins to Mooney like we saw in 2024. But clearly there's just not enough left in the tank from Cousins in order to really try to rekindle some of that magic that we saw last season.
Tua has 4 touchdowns, which is good to see for him because he's been kind of on the ropes this year, obviously. So nice little bounce back for the Miami Dolphins offense. We'll see if they can sustain that going forward. That is going to do it for today's show. Chris, shout out to you. We powered through your Bengals loss and we recapped a great Sunday of football. So appreciate you doing it as always, man.
No, of course, man. And just whether it's listen or watching through some of the pregame stuff, like Tua having a swollen eye and seeing just some of the ridiculous that happens before the games and during the games, like my Bengals like wind up losing to the Jets. I mean, it's just stuff that we have to deal with from a fantasy standpoint. But no, always happy to try and break it down with you on a Sunday night. I mean, always glad to talk ball with you, brother.
No doubt. And dealing with things is a great transition to our show on Monday, where Justin Boone joins me for the People's Panic Meter. It was a wild week, a lot of blowouts, a lot of weird players atop the scoring leader. So I'm sure there's going to be some panic out there. So after week 8, make sure you tweet at me or Boone as well. But if you really want to make sure you get to the front of the line, email us, fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. We got voice memos, videos. Those are super encouraged. But if you just want to write out your feelings, I love to read those as well. So hit fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. Try to get your submissions in before like 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday as we go live at 5 p.m. on YouTube. Until then, we are out.